in the Ring, brought to you by Salida Promotions. Please check out the Salida Promotions YouTube page for a wide array of boxing clips that's growing by the day. Like we said, we want to do something a little bit different. There's plenty of other shows out there that interview the best fighters in the world. We're going to do something different. We're going to interview the personalities of boxing behind the scenes that actually move the sport forward. And today it's actually an honor for me to have someone I've personally looked up to for many years. Started covering boxing completely on his own. We'll get into it in a minute for a newspaper in Los Angeles called The Wave many years ago. I can't wait to get into it. But my guest tonight, legendary Doug Fischer. Doug, good evening or good afternoon in Los Angeles.
You, that was very kind. That was a very generous intro. If I had whiter skin, you'd see me blushing.
Hey, Doug, first thing first, how are you? How's your family doing?
Family's doing fine, and that's really all that counts. And we spent a lot of time together under the same roof, which has been interesting. It's kind of like we stake out our own parts of the house. I'm here in the back where I have my office and a lot of mess, a lot of files and magazines and boxing books over here. My wife took over the kitchen. Sometimes she's in the garage, and the girls took over the front of the house, which is where their bedroom is and the living room. And it's, they're into their school year, like all their classes were online on a laptop. And so they're just in front of their laptops. And now that it's summer, like they're usually in summer camps, but all the summer camps are now virtual. Like they're doing summer school, like classes through their laptops or their tablets or whatever. So they've been sitting around a lot, So now it's like the challenge is how do we get them out of the house, while social distancing and getting them some exercise and that kind of stuff. Because, when I was a kid and probably the same as you, when it was summer, you leave the house in the morning and you come back at night and you're totally unsupervised. And that was okay for then, especially where I grew up, which was Ohio and southern Missouri, Midwest. And, it wasn't a city. Weren't a whole lot of dangerous parts, of the town that I grew up in. So, yeah, we just wander around. We ride our bikes all over the place. And also now it's like, all right, I got to get these kids out the house and get them some exercise. So I'm slowly doing it, and it's making me get into better shape because we're going to a track and running the track, and I'm starting to do pull-ups again. I'm struggling with it, but bit by bit. And I posted a few on Twitter and got some criticism, So it's like, all right, I'm gonna use it as motivation.
Doug,
get back in shape.
Doug, you would get criticized on Twitter for saying good morning.
You would. You're exactly right. So I shouldn't have let them bug me, but I'm kind of glad I let them get under my skin because it's like it's a challenge, So all right. Just like if you get into a boxing argument or like an argument about a historical perspective, it makes you check your own facts as you debate. And even if the debates get nasty and nobody really, cares to see the other side of the argument, it still causes you to if you're sincerely trying to debate and support your position, to support your argument, it makes you fact check. It makes you go back and look things up and examine yourself, and it makes you better. It makes you smarter, makes you more informed, and also you can use it. You could use the negativity on social media to motivate you. Of course, it's a rabbit hole, and I warn my daughters that because they're on social media too, and I tell them, you can just check your timeline just to see what's going on, and then 3 hours later, you've accomplished nothing. So it's a fine line,
Somebody in media once said that they teach their kids, don't put anything on social media you would not want to see on the cover of the New York Times, because essentially that's what it is.
But see, most kids don't know what the New York Times is. So they're like, what? What's that? Well, that's a newspaper. Well, what's that?
That's true. Doug, so much to unpack with you. We have a short time, but I want to kind of go through as much as we can. And I want to get into your history because I think it's so fascinating. But right now, just the big elephant in the room. What do you think of the long-term ramifications or consequences of COVID-19 to the sport?
We won't know till we know. That's that's kind of an easy out. It's easy to say. It's like saying with a prospect, how promising is this young fighter? And the truth really is, every time, in every instance, no matter how talented they are, or what kind of amateur background they have, or the people around them. I mean, they could have the best trainer, the best training environment, a great manager, and a great promoter who has great matchmakers, and still the only honest answer is time will tell. And that's kind of how I feel with COVID, with the pandemic and post-pandemic. I mean, I think it could be a game changer in the fact that, in some ways it kind of reminds me of after 9/11, right? And, America got through it. New York City got through that period, that terrorist attack, but it was never quite the same. And I remember, one of the fights that really stays in my mind, and it's not because of the fight itself, it's because of the circumstances around it, was the middleweight unification final between Bernard Hopkins and Felix Trinidad. And, a great performance, boxing clinic performed by Bernard Hopkins, who was the underdog. But that whole event was memorable because it was just 2 weeks after 9/11. In fact, it was supposed to happen that weekend, and it had to be pushed back a couple of weeks. And I remember, I had to catch a plane to, I think it was Newark Airport, and then from Newark catch a bus into the city. And for the first time, seeing the skyline without the Twin Towers. And so that was a change. Like, the impact of what had happened became that more real to me as somebody who wasn't in New York City at the time of the plane crashes. And air travel changed forever. It's never going to go back to the way it was. The way, the security checks and everything, and it's different now. And things get back to normal, but it's like a new normal. And so this might be the case post-pandemic, is maybe, at least for a couple years, we don't have capacity crowds at big events. Maybe there's fewer big events because modern age boxers, especially the last 10 to 15 years, if you're a world-class fighter, if you're a world-class fighter or a world champion, even a moderate attraction, these days you are affiliated with a top promoter who has an exclusive arrangement with a broadcast partner platform, whether it's a network like ESPN or streaming service like DAZN or, Fox or Showtime cable. You're paid well. You know what I mean? Like, whether or not you can put butts in seats like a Gennady Golovkin or an Anthony Joshua or a Canelo Alvarez, and they make incredible money. But even if you're somebody who's, you're still kind of untested, but you're regarded as a top fighter in your division, if you have a belt, you're making good money. It's to a point now where you got guys who are really still prospects, or maybe they are contenders, but they're still unproven, like a Ryan Garcia who says, hey, I got a great social media following and I sell tickets, and no, I'm not a champion, and no, I haven't fought the best fighters in my division, but I'm not going to fight for $250,000. I'm not going to fight for $350,000. And it's like, you got to be in a certain position just to be able to say that, and Ryan, I don't mean to pick on Ryan either, I respect his opinion. I don't agree with it, but I respect his opinion. He's kind of like he's the new generation, that's where it's going. It's like, a fighter is going to, believe he's got a certain worth. And if he doesn't get what he believes he's worth, he might not fight. They're not that desperate. I mean, the top guys. So they might be okay with sitting out all this year and maybe most of next year. So there might be less world-class fights between top-notch fighters, and there might be fewer super fights. Golden Boy's having a hard time finding the B-side for Canelo Alvarez, and they keep saying he's going to fight in September, but we're getting closer to August, and he doesn't have his opponent yet, and it's because fighters sitting back like, nope, I want $8 million, And Golden Boy can go back and like, you've never made more than $2 million. Come on, we'll pay you $3 million, 3.5, $4 million. And they're like, nope, I won't do it. Look,
well, I'm sure someone will take the.
But
I'm sure someone will do it.
No, somebody will have to. But what I'm saying is, nobody's in a rush. Nobody feels like, oh, this is a great opportunity. I can change my life. I can create a legacy. Even if I lose and look good, everyone's gonna know who I am. I'm gonna advance my stature in the sport. It's like fighters are a little more businesslike and a little more careful and a little more like managers. So if they've made some good paydays in the last 2 to 5 years, they might have enough saved up to where they're like, you know what? I'll just wait until there's a vaccine. So I'm thinking, that might be the effect. It's kind of like we'll have boxing because that's like the 1%, that's got it like that. For every top 10 contender or every title holder, there's 300 fighters who are close to world class.
Trying to get there.
They're on their way. Maybe they will be world class, or maybe they're not. Maybe they're gatekeepers. Maybe they're journeymen. Maybe they're club fighters. They got to fight to put food on the table, and they will fight, and they can make for good fights, And what'll be interesting is what will the public accept or not. You have a lot of hardcore fans out there that say they love boxing, but they've got certain standards. They're connoisseurs, and they're like, well, no, I'm not into 6-rounders, or maybe this guy's promising, but I know he's going to beat this journeyman, so I don't care, or whatever. And they'll complain or they'll ignore it or whatever. I know when the boxing bug bit me, and this is like late 80s, I had to have it all. Like I watched everything. I mean, Friday night fights, cable level, what was on the networks, obviously what was on premium cable. And I had to read it all too. I couldn't just watch it all. I had to read it all, and I was just like that. But not everybody's like that, Yeah. And boxing needs the casual fan, just as much as it needs the hardcore fan base. Its backbone. So we could be in some tough times economically.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective you take as far as some fighters that have it like that can actually elect to sit out. I spoke to a few promoters who think a little differently than you, and they actually think that one bright side that might come out of it is that fighters that had fights lined up that have now evaporated, they don't have anything on the horizon, that the next time they're offered a fight, they're going to accept a fight. One of the perks of being a Canelo or anyone at that level is you could, to some degree, pick and choose who you want to fight.
Yep.
That may not be the case because if you turn a fight down, like Eric Gomez from a Golden Boy told me, you turn a fight down, there may not be a next fight for a while. And that was a lesson for a lot of fighters that he's hearing.
That's an interesting take. I think that's a glass half full look, and I like it. I'm glad there are promoters who are looking at it like that. They're being realistic because they're admitting that there's not going to be as many shows. So if a fighter passes up on one show, they may have to wait a while. They may have to wait a couple of months before the next show. And so maybe it creates a sense of urgency. And I think it will for the hungry. And this includes a lot of world-class fighters, but it's going to be the fighters who don't have a name yet. You know what I mean? It's definitely, I tell you what, it's going to be female fighters. They're hungry, and they don't make as much money as the world-class men. And they got to fight. So, I mean, and they're world-class. I'm talking about world-class fighters, all of them. You know what I mean? I think you'll see big fights between the female fighters, the best fighting the best. I think you'll probably see that with the lighter weight classes, sub featherweight, when you're talking about, junior featherweights and bantamweights and super bantamweights, and which is great because those divisions are deep and those fighters are excellent, and they're not used to making 7-figure paydays, so they will step into the void. I still think, and I know it's a cynical view, I still think the stars of the glamour divisions, which in the United States is welterweight, middleweight, and heavyweight, and even the weight classes in between those glamour divisions, they got money, man. They got money. They got egos. They got a lot of people whispering in their ears. Yep. But I hope I'm wrong about that. I really am. I hope the fighters prove me wrong and get out there and fight even without an audience, even without a live audience. I hope they're willing to do it.
So I do want to go back and try to make a connection to the present day. I heard you talk very glowingly when you were first starting out. You were going to the gym yourself, never to compete, but just because you love boxing. So you were going to the gym. You were reading the Ring magazine, right? Coincidentally,
sure
when you were younger,
collecting
you're collecting it, and you were marveled by the names in the magazine. Yeah. And then these are the same people that are like heroes, and you're watching them work out. And there was one gentleman that you watched in the ring in front of you, and you watched him in the gym work out, and you knew even back then that this is a can't miss superstar. And that was Shane Mosley Jr.
Yep.
Right. Yep. So he had just had all the goods. I think he was fighting at 135 at that time, and then you watched him fight. He just had all the goods, and you knew he was gonna go there. Can you make parallels to today's world? Who's that prospect that is just I know you can never say can't miss, but just that prospect that is just when he fights, you have to watch.
Well, I haven't seen this particular fighter in the gym, but I've heard stories about him. It kind of remind me of Mosley, and he seems just as precocious. And it is actually has like Shane was an incredible amateur, but this particular fighter has an even better amateur pedigree because he made it to the Olympics. Shane was beat out for the Olympic spot by Vernon Forrest. And Shane had amateur rivals like Stevie Johnson, who they split maybe 4 fights. And obviously it's legend now that he beat a young Oscar De La Hoya. When they were both like under 10 years old or so. He beat Rafael Reyes. Vernon definitely had his number as an amateur and as a professional. But this fighter I'm thinking of is kind of reminds me, technically speaking, like Vernon Forrest, but from what I hear from the gyms, kind of reminds me of Mosley, and that's Shakur Stevenson. And I heard even before Stevenson had grown into, had matured physically, we call it man muscle. Even at that point, like 2.5 years ago, when he's helping Vasily Lomachenko prepare for Guillermo Rigondeaux. So that was December of 2017. So Stevenson is just like maybe 1 year, maybe a little more than 1 year in the professional ranks, and he's sparring with Lomachenko. And I heard, now I don't hear this from Lomachenko. I don't hear this from Lomachenko's father. They don't talk. You know what I mean? They keep that stuff to themselves. But people around Vasily, and actually I did talk to Vasily one-on-one prior to Vasily's fight with Jorge Linares, and I asked him about it, and he said that Stevenson was excellent. But before that, while he and Stevenson were sparring, I heard from people, around that gym in Oxnard, California, and they said that Team Lomachenko was pleasantly surprised with how good the young man was, and they felt they got some of their best work from Shakur Stevenson, who wasn't even physically mature at that point. When I saw him fight, he looked incredible. His form was there, the speed, the timing, the reflexes, the ring intelligence, and the technique. That was all there, but the physicality, the physical side of the sport, he wasn't there yet. He didn't have the man strength. That sets him apart from Shane, because Shane in the gym and, from his very first fight, he was physical. He could manhandle men, even though he wasn't a man yet, in age. He was fit. His body looked rocked up. He was strong. He could punch. he didn't need. He was so fast and so talented. He didn't need to have punching power, but he had punching power, and on top of punching power, he had the durability. He had incredible chin. He could take any kind of power punch, and he could rough guys up on the inside. So that made him really special. And he loved to train. He loved to work out. He loved being at the gym. And that was like his social life. That's where all his friends were. He would show up and always happy, always in a great mood, always positive, easygoing, very approachable. But when he got in that ring, it was like he fell into a trance. And he's not trying to hurt anybody, but man, he hurt a lot of guys.
Yeah, but Doug, I wonder how much of that was Shane and Shakur on completely different, different planets in their first fight. Shakur already has some money. His first fight's on TV. He's the headliner. So he almost can kind of take it easy and show some technical speed. Whereas Shane Mosley has to display some power to get that casual found in there. Yeah.
Shane was unsigned not because he lacked talent, but his father and trainer, Jack Mosley, was also his manager. And Jack, even before Shane turned pro, had a reputation of being kind of difficult to deal with. Jack didn't just want to be the trainer and manager. He wanted to be the promoter. And he had kind of a flair for that too. He was very gregarious and he had all kind of ideas on how to promote fighters or how to publicize them and get the word out and all. And he wasn't camera shy either. He was kind of he was ready for fame, and he was definitely always ready for Shane to be famous. And they got there together, but not as quick as they would have had Shane signed with like a main event or a Top Rank, or even the Goosens who were out here in Southern California at the time. So it was a little. I think they signed with a club show promoter. I think a guy named Patrick Ortiz, and it wasn't long between Pat and Jack were butting heads. And Shane was sitting out, waiting out his promotional contract, So, but for 3 years, 3 or 4 years, Shane was a club fighter. Yep. You know who came after Shane that reminded me a lot of Shane was Tim Bradley. Tim Bradley was a demon, trained his ass off in the gym. Was somebody like Shane Mosley that trained around Mexican fighters. And respected the Mexican style, and went to the body and was aggressive and was made sure to learn his inside craft as well as his outside craft, but had the talent and the athleticism to stay on the outside and use a quick jab and move when he had to or just when he wanted to. Could mix it up like that. And Timothy Bradley had sort of a similar rise to what I think is a Hall of Fame career in that he started at the club level. He wasn't signed by the big shots, wasn't signed by Golden Boy, wasn't signed by Bob Arum at Top Rank, wasn't signed by, Lou DiBella or, Kathy Duva or whoever. He started off with the local club show promoters, Thompson Boxing, but they kept him busy and they built him up. And then, he did like a co-promotional thing with Gary Shaw. And that relationship got him on Showtime and Showbox, and he still had to fight hard, fighting for next to nothing, and until he made enough of a name of himself, won a world title against the odds, and was willing to unify titles and go up in weight, and finally signed by Top Rank and got a shot at Manny Pacquiao. And from that point on, he was, a top tier, an elite fighter or whatever. And I think he will get into the Hall of Fame. But he's somebody who early in his career was just like anybody else who turns pro. Nobody wants him. He has to beg to get on a card. And when he fights, he's going to be put in tough. They're not making matchups to make him look good. Right. He wasn't courted as an amateur, and he didn't sign with a signing bonus. And it's not like the promoters are like, okay, we got to recoup this investment, and we have to be careful with him, at least for the first year or two, even if he's like an Olympian, because we want to get him exposure and make him look invincible. And we want people to call him. We don't want him to struggle. We want him to shine. So you get that hype train going, right? So Shane didn't have that. Tim Bradley didn't have that. Shakur Stevenson does have that, but he's already ready to face the best. Yeah. So that tells me he's got a mentality like a Bradley or a Shane Mosley, because once he won that, I mean, even before he won the title, the vacant WBO featherweight title, you know, outclassing Joet Gonzalez, was pretty good undefeated young fighter. He beat Christopher Diaz. He stepped in there with Christopher Diaz and he shined. And it let me know, okay, this guy's he's willing to roll the dice, because he's facing seasoned pros and fellow undefeated prospects and up and comers. And once he got that WBO title, he was like, I don't just want to defend it, I want to unify. Yeah. And he's calling out Josh Warrington. In fact, he was calling out Warrington, who's a handful, even before he won a title. And now it looks like he's abdicated that belt and he's going up in weight to 130. And he's not saying, give me a tune-up or whatever. He's like, he wants the world title holders now. And I think if he were to get any of the world title holders at 130, a lot of people, a lot of members of the media and insiders would favor him to win. So he's ready. You know, he let the world know, hey, I'm ready to do it now. And, you know, I think if Mosley and Bradley had been able to get a world title fight, like, you know, between their 13th and, 15th or 16th pro fight, you know, they would have done it. And I think Shane at 15-0 was ready for any lightweight in the world. Yeah. I wrote that at the time. I really believed it, because I saw the ass that he kicked in the gym, and they were elite boxers. Yeah. Maybe they were the best of the best, and they would come, you know, it would be competitive, but at some point Shane would step it up a notch, and he wouldn't just take over that sparring session. He'd put them on their butts, you know, bust their noses or whatever, you know, or bust their ribs, you know, what have you. Shane was brutal as a nice guy.
Hey, so you know, you mentioned a little bit about Ryan Garcia, and it was widely reported that Golden Boy did want to bring a Ryan Garcia fight, you know, right in the pandemic, as to bring boxing back, and it didn't work out.
That was going to be their first fight back, 4th of July weekend. Yep. 4th of July fell on a Saturday.
Yep. So didn't work out with Ryan Garcia, but it opened the door to another young fighter, and I'd love to get your thoughts and your impression on the ceiling of Virgil Ortiz.
It's a high ceiling, because he's got natural ability. He's got God's gift of punching power, both hands. I've watched him train in the gym. He's the most dedicated of all of Robert Garcia's fighters, and that's saying something, because he's got some real dedicated champions, as a matter of fact, like Jose Ramirez. You know, he's a nose to the grindstone type of dude. And Joel Diaz said the exact same thing. When Virgil was with Diaz, he said he's the hardest worker, and that he can only spar with the veterans. You know, your Lucas Matisses. He can't spar with guys his age. He can't spar with 19 and 20-year-olds. It's not fair to those guys, you know, because he's precocious, physically speaking, but he's very smart. He's a very good technician. I see a lot of the finer points of boxing, which a lot of people overlook because of the sensational knockouts, and he's a hunter. And a lot of times an aggressive seek and destroy fighter, they'll just label them punchers or pressure fighters, or they'll say they're a boxer puncher if they're being nice, but they're still overlooking the craft, the ring craft a lot of these people have. And I've seen that happen with Gennady Golovkin, to a lesser extent, with Sergey Kovalev. You know, they didn't really give him credit for his jab and his judge of distance, you know, and the fact that he could be kind of light on his feet. But, you know, whatever. Knockouts, it's like a home run in baseball. It gets people excited, so I can understand it. But if you're a real boxing fan, you should be looking at Virgil Ortiz Jr.'s technique, because he's a student of the game, and he's had some good teachers, and he wants to learn. And he's the first man in the gym, and he's the last man to leave. And if he does 40 rounds, you know, of floor exercises and sparring or whatever, the punching power is the same. You can hear it. You hear it on the mitts. You hear it on the heavy bag. You hear it, you know, on his sparring partners' stomachs, you know, and their rib cages. You know, it's the same. The power does not fall off. So he's gonna be hard to beat, because he's very strong-willed. We don't know how good his. That's one thing, all prospects have to prove. But he was Ring Magazine's 2019 Prospect of the Year, and he was definitely worthy of it. And I'm as excited about Virgil Ortiz Jr. and another young welterweight out of Philadelphia named Jaron Ennis as I am any of the welterweight title holders. Because unfortunately the welterweight title holders, they haven't all fought each other. It should have been a round robin in succession. I know Keith Thurman fought Danny Garcia, and he fought Sean Porter. And Porter, fought Errol Spence, and he's fought the other. Porter's been willing to fight anybody, but you need everybody, and you need people to cross the street. And we got poor Terrence Crawford over there on the top rank island by himself. So I haven't been as excited about the welterweight division as I'd like to be. But with these up and comers, I'm watching them with great interest, and I hope they fight someday soon. I don't have to wait until the title's on the line either.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy for me to say. I'm just watching, but I'd love to see those two get it on. And I think, the style matchup to me is like Julio Cesar Chavez and Meldrick Taylor.
Yeah.
It has classic written on it. Yeah.
I think we all hope to see Crawford against Spence while both in their prime. And we don't know what Spence is, but kudos to Spence for fighting Danny Garcia as his first fight after that car accident. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll find out after that. Yeah, what's that? What level he's at? Following the car wreck. I mean, hopefully he can make a full recovery.
Doug, we're almost out of time, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you one last question. So you were brought in to be one of the editors of the Ring Online, to just build out the online content of the magazine. You did a phenomenal job with you and Michael Rosenthal with that. And then in I believe it was 2019 that you were named the editor-in-chief of the magazine.
Oh, actually, from the start of 2018. Actually, I came on board in the middle of a magazine, like the final magazine of 2017, like the Year End Awards magazine. Yeah. And then the very next magazine after that, which was like we finished like in January of 2018, was my first Ring magazine as editor-in-chief. So, and it's gone by fast, so it's been 2.5 years so far. And it's been an education. I mean, I learned a lot from Michael, just being co-editor of what was ringonline.com and is now ringtv.com. And I learned a lot being the associate editor while Michael was editor-in-chief. And I've had a lot of help, and I've learned from the managing editor Brian Hardy, and who is now the associate editor Tom Gray, and we all feed off each other, and it's a small group, it's a small nucleus, but it works. I'd be remiss not to mention the creative director Lamar Clark, and also a freelance art director Michael Cronenberg, who came on board to help us with the Four Kings special issue and the Gotti Ward special issue, which I'm really proud of.
It's a great issue. Doug, you're all great guys. You, Tom, Brian, all great guys. The team are great guys. I'm privileged to even been able to work with you. But Lamar Clark is a different kind of a nice guy. I mean, he might be the nicest of everybody.
Yeah, he really is. Yeah.
So the question is, you become editor-in-chief of an institution, of a brand. It's not just a magazine; it's a brand. It's known the world over. It's known by casual boxing fans.
That's been the realization, because I always, for me, the Ring, it's just always been there, and to me it's the Bible of boxing. It is boxing history. Yep. But once you're the editor-in-chief, the feedback that you get from people around the world, even from like certain fighters and promoters that publicly may not say good things about the Ring, or might ignore it, like in private, like through emails or text messages, they revere it. You know what I mean? It's like,
because they looked at it when they were a kid.
Right. Exactly. It's so that's eye-opening, and just all the contacts from around the world, like the media contacts that reach out and ask permission to reprint something, or to whatever, to use something from the archives. It's opened my eyes to, like, it really is a brand. and it's how I've been thinking about the magazine since last year, and I was real proud to do that partnership with Super Rare Clothing, the Super Rare Fight Shop, and to bring those Muhammad Ali Ring Magazine covers to T-shirts and to hoodies. And it's something I want to do more of with Super Rare, but with some other, equipment companies and apparel companies. You may have seen an announcement from a video game company called Steel City Interactive, and they've got a video game called Esports Boxing Club that it's in development right now, and hopefully it gets launched by the end of this year, definitely by January of 2021. But the Ring Magazine will be a part of it, and it'll be something where if you have a fighter, because you can play the game as a fighter or you can play the game as a manager. This is the era of the fanagers, right? Everybody thinks they know best. So, you can guide a fighter up the rankings and all, and you can fight for like domestic titles or like the Lonsdale belt, the British title. Mm-hmm. You can fight for the WBC title. But I like to think, the Ring Magazine, that's the toughest title to win in the actual sport. And that's the way it'll be in this video game. So that's very exciting to me. And that's something that I want. I want to get that brand out, get the logo and the name and the reputation out to a younger generation. Because I got kids. I got a daughter who's 12 and a daughter who's 16. The 12-year-old, it's all about games. And it's like, she doesn't just play the games. That's how she interacts with her friends. Like, instead of calling her friend up and say, hey, what happened in school today? They play a game together, and they're talking while they play the game, whether it's via text or a little box like we're doing right now via Skype. That's how they interact, It's like interactive gameplay, interactive creativity, like drawing and animations and stuff like that. So that's how you reach them. That's more real to them than television. So that was very important, and that's a ball I'm going to keep rolling. You know what I mean? And I want to keep that going. I want to reach new audiences. Right.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Not only your vision for the magazine, but how do you want to be remembered? At some point, you'll move on. You'll go do something else. And what's your stamp? What's your stamp on the magazine? Well, I think we lost Doug, but we went over time. I could talk to Doug Fischer for hours and hours and hours. He's an encyclopedia of boxing, extremely knowledgeable, and just an absolute great personality, great person, classy individual, class act. Love Doug Fischer. Again, I could talk to him for hours. We will get him back because there's so much more I want to talk to Doug about. But I will say, though, fantastic episode of In the Ring. Really informative episode from Doug Fischer. Please check out the Salida Promotions YouTube page, continuing to add to the library of just classic fights. Just most recently, if you're interested in vintage heavyweight slugfest, we got fights from David Tua, Corey Sanders, the one and only James Buster Douglas. I mean, we have the library is continuing to grow. And the subscribers are continuing to grow. So we invite everyone to check out the page. New content and fights added daily, actually hourly, if you check it. I certainly do. And I'm surprised every time I look at it to see all these classic fights that I forgot about. Like yesterday, team added a fight by Iran Barkley, which a fight that I've heard of. And I think I saw it. I'm not sure if I saw it. So I had to watch it on YouTube. To recall it. Absolute unbelievable library, the Salida Promotions YouTube page, and we'll continue to bring you episodes with the behind the scenes boxing personalities that move the sport forward and hopefully give you some entertainment. So have a good evening, and we'll talk to you next week.